Well, Ohio State put on what Steve termed as a command performance, and that was pretty obvious. The Texas performance, biggest favorite of the weekend, closest game of the weekend. I was mighty impressed with Arizona State. Texas comes out with the dagger right out of the gate. Boom. Pass, touchdown, Golden, and he was phenomenal all day. And then the big punt return, of course, from Silas Bolden. It looked like, this will be what we expected it to be. Then the offense bogged down. I did all sorts of numbers calculations, like 42 minutes of game time without a touchdown, just had the one field goal drive. And Arizona State looked like the better team in the second half. What's your evaluation of the Longhorns coming into this one?
Yeah, I think there's two different avenues to look at it. I think one, Arizona State came in with the right game plan, right? They wanted to keep the Texas offense off the field as long as they can. And if you look at the time of possession difference, especially in that third quarter, I think it was something like 12-3 in favor of Arizona State. And so by the time the fourth quarter comes around and it's winning time, the Texas defense is gassed, and Arizona State could do whatever the heck they wanted to with them. And so that's really why I think the Arizona State offense found so much success. It's just they held onto the ball. They did what they needed to do to keep Texas tired and keep that defense on their heels. I think on the other side of the field, I think there's this weird mix where there's days where the Texas running game is going well and they can hit that outside zone and things are going well. The offensive line is communicating well and really doing what they need to do. And then, like we saw against Arizona State late in that game, they just weren't. They weren't creating seams. The running backs weren't able to find any sort of running room, any sort of space. They weren't able to make themselves small in the hole. And Arizona State pounced on it. And so that's when Texas can't get the running game going, when they can't have access to the play action, the offense struggles. And I think, I'm looking not to spin it too far ahead, but I am curious, let's say, to see how it works on against Ohio State, because it is the most talented team I've played all year. So we'll see how that turns out.
I'm going to get out of the way because people can hear me talk all the time. Anytime I want to, I just jump on here and start talking. So I would love to hear from you two so you guys can go back and forth in regards to questions about the Buckeyes and the Horns. It's all yours, Steve.
Well, yes. And Gerald, great talking to you. Quinn Ewers, obviously, going way back, was at Ohio State for a cup of coffee before he went to Texas. And looks like he's had a pretty good 3-year run to do what they did last year and kind of a breakthrough season, win the Big 12 and get to the playoff. And then obviously this year, only 2 losses to Georgia. And I know he was banged up a little bit earlier in the season, but for Ohio State fans who really haven't spent a lot of time watching Quinn the last 3 years, like what's his development been like? And is he really scratching the surface of where he's capable, or is he playing maybe the best football right now?
It's such a tough thing to evaluate, right? Because a guy comes into the school as the top-rated quarterback recruit of all time, and you expect, Trevor Lawrence out the gate, right? If you remember that a few years back, how good he was when he got to Clemson. And Quinn just hasn't been that. He's not been healthy since he got there. He got injured in that Alabama game. He had a shoulder injury last year. He had an oblique injury this year, now the ankle injury as well. And so it's hard for me to evaluate because this is like apocrypha or an anathema amongst Texas fans, but he has as many Big 12 championships as Colt McCoy and Vince Young, right? He's been in the college football playoff twice, right? There are those things that there's the perspective we have to have that Quinn Ewers statistically, and as far as what he's done on the field, is in the same conversation as 2 of the greatest that Texas fans have ever seen do it, right? He's number 3 behind Colt McCoy and Major Applewhite on a lot of the career statistics, right? So when we think about through that lens, Quinn Ewers has done a really good job being what Texas needed in this era. But is he the guy that we expected him to be when there was all of the recruiting kerfuffle when I was watching and texting friends that lived in Lubbock? Hey, is Quinn still there? What's going on? Has he made it to Austin yet? That's not the expectation that he's lived up to, but you see flashes of it, which I think is the most frustrating part. He took over at the fourth quarter in overtime. After he threw that interception, he was 10 of 11 for 180-something yards and 2 touchdowns, right? The dude can turn it on, but we haven't seen the consistent level of that throughout games. He hasn't put together 4 good quarters. Maybe the Alabama game last year is probably the closest we've seen to that. So I think that's probably, from a Texas fan's perspective, the most frustrating part is you see flashes of excellence from Quinn Ewers. You see that, this is what scouts saw. This is what made him a perfect rated quarterback coming out of high school, but we just don't see it all the time.
Mm-hmm. The two running backs, Wisner and Blue, how do they kind of complement one another?
Yeah, it's a very different running style. Jaden Blue is your kind of one cut and go. If you go back and watch the first round game against Clemson, that's probably the best example of his skill set. He's a guy that I call like faster than geometry. Right? There's a guy that has a pretty decent angle and he can just outrun it. And that's his big deal. He struggles to hold on to the ball sometimes. Multiple times this year, they made him walk around campus holding a football just to make sure he didn't, like old school stuff, right? Contravian Wisner is a guy who's more your classic. I'm just going to stick my nose in there in the zone scheme and see what pops out. And he has been great. I love Trey Wisner. He is a guy who, when he came to Texas, he was a 3-star kid, had shifted around and really was unable to find his footing in high school. And now he's kind of come in and had to step up and turn into a 1,000-yard back when Texas needed it. So his ability to get the tough yards shows up sometimes, but obviously, it would be, I think Texas fans would be happier if CJ Baxter hadn't gotten hurt in preseason camp. I'll just probably say it like that.
Yeah. Back on quarterback for a second, Arch Manning, is it possible that we'll see him in as a change-up quarterback at times? I know that they've used him and maybe even in instances where yours was struggling a little bit. Do they ever still put him out there, I guess?
It has been less frequent than when they first did it. I think when Quinn was first coming back from the injury, it was more frequent. But I think now that he's gotten more confident with himself, and now that massive ankle brace he has on, that he's comfortable with it, I think we're going to see less of him. And I think part of the problem is, and this is, again, this is one of those things that we have to have some nuance with, right? Arch Manning, incredible quarterback, still a redshirt freshman, right? So he still needs some time processing pass coverages, reading the defense. So it's really been that Arch package has been mostly of a like zone read kind of, am I going to keep it or am I going to hand it off to the running back? There's not been a ton of wrinkles and teams have kind of seen that. And so I think until they throw a pass in there, we're not going to see a ton or as much as we have or much as fans maybe want to see.
Yeah. The receiving group looks very deep to me. 9 different people have caught touchdown passes. 8 different people have 20 catches or more. And of course, that includes Blue and Wisner, the 2 running backs. But what's your thought about the receiving group? Ohio State secondary has played really well the last 3 games in particular, had some penalties and some big plays against them prior to that, but they have really played much better here the last 3 games. Are they good enough, you feel, to challenge this OSU secondary?
Yeah, this is the thing that terrifies me is probably not the right word because it's a football game. But I haven't done the research yet. I was gonna work on it this afternoon. But Texas and Steve Sarkisian have struggled against Jim Knowles' defenses. That 3-high safety look is just something that I don't know whether it's they can't take the top off and so they're unable to get the run game going underneath. I'm not sure what it is. But like the pass game against specifically like Jim Knowles when he was at Oklahoma State, it was a struggle for Steve Sarkisian in that game. Now there are some talent differences there. But the wide receivers that Texas has, Isaiah Bond has been gimpy. He had an ankle injury. He tried to come back from too early. So he hasn't really been as effective at the pass game as folks wanted him to be. Matthew Golden has really emerged in the last couple of games as kind of the Mr. Big Play guy. He was on the receiving end of that game extending 4th and 13 overtime touchdown reception. He was the guy who kind of found space behind the safety and did that. And then really Gunnar Helm is the other name to really watch in this group. The tight end, he was again another 3-star guy. They identified him late in the cycle, brought him in, developed the heck out of him. Jeff Banks did a really good job getting him ready to play, and he's become one of the better tight ends in the country. He and Quinn Ewers have a really good rapport. They do really a good job, and Ewers knows how to throw a ball that Gunnar Helm likes to catch, especially in the end zone. Helm's got a pretty decent catch radius, and so he can put it in some spots where if Gunnar's hands don't get on it, it's going out of bounds, it's going out the back of the end zone, that type of thing. So those are probably the names to watch in this game as far as the wide receivers.
Yeah, offensive line, OSU had 8 sacks against Oregon. Is the Texas offensive line, is this one of the better offensive lines that they've had? And how have they done in terms of protecting the quarterbacks, I guess?
It's a weird conversation to have. You have to talk about Georgia and then everybody else. I think it's the two ways you have to talk about this, right? Because Georgia had their way with this front. Due to some injuries, due to some struggles, Georgia did some things defensively in that first game that Texas just hadn't seen before, and kind of caught them slipping. Against most other teams, Texas has been pretty solid. Now, pending the health of Cam Williams, the right tackle, who's probably got an NFL future, maybe not this offseason, but next offseason. That's one to watch when the injury report comes out. Is Cam Williams going to be healthy? And Kelvin Banks is Kelvin Banks. There's a reason why Oregon wanted him as bad as they did. There's a reason why I'm really glad Mario Cristobal left Oregon when he did. He's been great. Have experienced guys on the interior at center and guard. Texas has been solid in the offensive line. Again, outside of those 2 games against Georgia, especially protecting the quarterback. But they're injured. So Cam Williams' health is the one I really want to keep an eye on. Jake Majors is good. They said he would have gone back in the Clemson game after they didn't release what it was, but I would say it was a concussion 99% of the time, like the way his body looked when it went down after that blindside hit. So they said he's ready to go. He could have gone back in against Clemson. So Cam Williams' health is a big one to watch.
Yeah, the only other thing I would ask about is defensively. We saw in the Rose Bowl what Ohio State was able to exploit when Will Howard has time. He's become somewhat of a big play type guy, getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Buka in particular, and a few others. Just how does Texas match up on the outside on the perimeter? I know they have the Jim Thorpe Award winner, but are they 3, 4, 5 deep there in the secondary? And can they keep Ohio State from making those big plays?
I think asking them to completely shut down a wide receiving core in a passing game that explosive is like an unfair expectation of any defensive secondary. Like it's just not going to happen. There's too much talent, too much speed, too much explosiveness there. Can they slow them down? Maybe, right? Jahdae Barron has been incredible, obviously Thorpe Award winner. Jaden Gilbo, who's kind of been his understudy at nickel for a couple of years, and they play with a little positional versatility between those two. Manny Muhammad at corner is probably the one to watch. He was incredible last year as a freshman. He's gotten picked on a couple of times. A lot of the big passes you saw against Clemson were to Manny's side of the field. So I'm really again, that's the matchup to watch. The back end has been great. Michael Taff, former walk-on, has been great as a center fielder. Andrew Makuba, the guy who came up with the interception to end the game against Arizona State, has been Mr. Like when Texas needs a big play in the secondary, he's the one that does it. He's part of the reason why Georgia doesn't have their quarterbacks in this one, or didn't have a healthy quarterback a couple weeks ago. So like they're good, but again, this is a team with a 90%, I think, blue chip ratio. And a lot of that is at the offensive skill position, right? There's no 2 ways around that. And frankly, Will Howard likes playing against Texas. He put up like 304, I think, in Austin last year. Part of the reason why they were able to take that game to overtime and almost come away with a win in that game. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see how he exploits a team that he did a good job of it last year with lesser talent.
Yeah. You know, you get to the Final Four in this format, you haven't lucked your way into anything. You had, these teams all had to go out and win 2 games to get to this point, and it kind of debunked the idea that, winning your conference championship and getting a bye was this huge advantage. Now everybody's on equal footing. Everybody's played 2 games, and nobody's gotten here by accident. Well, Penn State, SMU, and Boise State. They
played a game and a half, I guess.
Yeah, we could say that they kind of lucked their way into the Final Four, but otherwise, everybody else had to put their cards on the table and actually got football games. Not sure. Are you based in Austin or Dallas or which?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Yeah, I love San Antonio. Been there for NCAA basketball and the Alamo Bowl 20 years ago, but to me, it looks like Texas is going to have the advantage in the stadium, probably 2-1. And, it's obvious, with it being in Texas. And Ohio State will travel, and they'll have a few people there. But, I think Texas is going to have the fan advantage. And to me, inside, how does Ohio State handle the noise? How does Ohio State offense avoid those pre-snap penalties, jumping off sides and false starts and these kind of things. So that's going to be, I think, an integral part of this game.
Yeah, there was this weird movement this last couple of weeks of Texas fans like skipping over the Peach Bowl, just like, okay, we're just going to skip that and prepare for Dallas. Getting to Atlanta is not cheap, and doing it twice in a month is real expensive. So, yeah, Texas fans were like, we're just going to opt out, which turned out to be a bad decision, but it is what it is, right? So, glad they didn't get caught counting their chickens. We'll say it like that.
Yeah, it's going to be to me, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that it's going to be a game where the crowd is hot and hang on every play. And I've enjoyed my time down there. The Missouri game, obviously, last year was not a good game for Ohio State in any way, shape, or form, playing with their backup quarterback and some other guys. Marvin Harrison Jr. not playing. Some other guys sat out as well. But you look at it that. They'll have all hands on deck. They're pretty healthy, other than the two offensive linemen, and should be in really good shape for this game. And Jeremiah Smith, as long as they got Jeremiah Smith, they got a chance. In my mind, he makes the hard catch look really easy, and he's obliterated a lot of records in the OSU record book already. And we'll see if he can do the same this week with the Cotton Bowl.
It's amazing how smart coaches look when they have players like Jeremiah Smith, right? It's really easy to look smart when you have those guys.
It is, no doubt.